sharing the load, delegation, and lessons in leadership from the life of Moses. So I am the CEO at Covenant Community Care. We're a federally qualified health center in Detroit. We have 3 locations, about 150 employees. We have medical, behavioral health, dental, substance use care, healthcare for the homeless, wide array of services. And I had originally put like a picture of our buildings, but I actually decided to put this picture. This is from our most recent staff renewal day, which is something we do throughout the year, about 2 to 3 times a year. We close all the clinics and we do spiritual training, spiritual development, things like that. This was all about resilience, but it's also probably the best picture of my beloved load. So these are the people that I'll be telling you about who I'm sharing. So I want to give a quick shout out to Avante Jackson in the back, who did, I know you came from Exodus this morning on Moses, and then I had a team member in that presentation. They said it was amazing. We're going to spend most of our time referencing Numbers 11. And when I was studying for this session, one of the biblical commentaries I was reading called it a negative story about complaint for which the reader is unprepared. And I thought that really resonated with me because it described a time in my life that was a pretty accurate description of a time in my own leadership where I spent a lot of time spiritually with Moses and professionally with the art of delegation. So let's come with me to 6 months in 2022. It pushed me in a whole nother direction. So these are actual slides. Most of the slides that you're going to see are actual slides that I used in meetings from 2022 through 2023. So if you see a little thing pop up, that's a 2025 edit on a 2023 slide. So on July 15th in 2022, we had an all-staff meeting. This was not a staff renewal day. Okay, staff renewal day is about renewing. This was to announce a restructuring plan. Earlier that week, that Monday, I had met with 2 of our suburban clinics and announced that over the next 18 months, we were going to be closing 2 suburban clinics, and we would be building a larger site on the west side of Detroit. So on Monday, I met in person with both of the impacted clinics, and then on Friday, we shut everything down. We had everybody in one room, explained why are we doing this and what is the plan. So in 2022, and again, these are actual slides, so this is what my staff saw. We actually had a lot of money, as did all health centers, because it was the time of one-time pandemic funding. So our balance sheet looked phenomenal. It looked the best it had ever looked. But coming into the pandemic, we had actually had a budget deficit of about $1 million. So I knew that while everything looked great, if we just kind of lived in la-la land, in about 3 years, reality would come knocking, which I didn't catch until this morning when I was looking at the slide. I was like, oh, it's 3 years, like from 2022. I didn't even catch that. So I said, it's a weird time to be talking about closing things, but I'm thinking further in the future, and we really need to adjust, our status as an organization. So these are the reasons that we gave staff. Restructuring allowed us to fully staff fewer locations. If any of you were in leadership in 2022, you remember nobody could staff anything. So I had a lot of openings. And then it addressed our longstanding reality of outgrowing our federal grant. So the sites that we closed didn't have any new access point funds tied to them. So we were operating 5 sites on 3 federal grants. And that is just a challenging thing to do financially. And then it was a rare opportunity to proactively restructure through reassignment as opposed to reacting with layoffs. So what do I mean by that? We had openings, so we could tell people, you can still work at Covenant just at another location, or if you don't want to do that, we can do severance, and not just severance for, C-suite, severance for everybody. We had a lot of cash. So folks had options and time, and this was what we told everybody, and I thought, okay, I know it's a tough call, but there's a clear rationale, and we're gonna go for it. Well, in November 2022, I hit the rock. Now, I see some of you know Moses, so you know what it means to hit the rock. So after that July meeting, after explaining the rationale, I'm like, okay, I know it was tough, but we're gonna move forward. That is not what happened, all right, after that. And listen, little leadership tech, I wrote this part. Don't get up and just wing conversations about times of conflict. Just think it through, So it's a good time to give you some background about my leadership journey. So I became Covenant's acting CEO in the fall of 2019. The go live for my first day as acting CEO was the go live for a new EMR. So that was a lot of fun. By the time you hit 2022, I've led through COVID, I've led through a budget deficit, I've led through EMR changes, and we had a 5-year delayed capital project. We hadn't even gotten anywhere near being in the ground on this new building that I was saying we were going to build. So all of this has happened just in the first 3 years of my tenure, and I'm pretty tired. So when I start to have to navigate backlash, I am really exhausted, and I'm starting to deal with criticism, and I'm tired, so I'm not myself. So in November, I got a request via email to come to the December leadership meeting. At the time, our leadership meeting was once a month on a Friday afternoon for 4 hours. That's how we felt. And so they said, could you come to the leadership meeting and explain again the rationale for the restructuring? And I read that email, and I said, okay. Now, I would not presume to speak for all Black women, but I am a Black woman. I know a lot of Black women. Most times when we say okay repeatedly like that, it's not okay. Like nothing is actually, I knew you would. Yeah, it's not okay. So nothing was okay. And I decided that what I was going to do was make a case statement of everything I faced when I first took over Covenant financially. I was going to write out a case statement. My master's is health service administration. We did a lot of case statements. And I was going to give it to the leadership team and say, okay, and since you don't like my plan, come up with your own plan. I'll give you 3 hours, I'll be back. And you can explain your plan to me. Proverbs 12:15 says, a fool's ways are right in your own mind. It's one of my favorite scriptures because, boy, was that foolish. And so I'm grateful I can say I almost hit the rock. I did not do it. The back end of that verse says, but a wise person listens to advice. And I think God knew I was really far out there because my advice actually came from God himself that time. So it was November. The meeting was to take place on December 2nd. I was going home. I'm actually from Detroit. From Flint. I work in Detroit, but I'm from Flint, born and raised. All my family's still in Flint. And so it was Thanksgiving. I had to go take some dressing for my mom to her sister, my aunt. And I said, my Aunt Jackie wasn't home yet, so I went to the bookstore. I pulled up to the bookstore, and I was just talking to myself like, yeah, I got it. I'm going to give it to him. I'm going to walk out and go sit in my office. I'm going to read a book. And my office is right across from the conference room. So it was dramatic. It was just, And so God said, why don't you look at Moses? I said, sure. And I opened my Bible, went right to Moses hitting the rock. And I said, and immediately I just started crying, like immediately. It was the road to Damascus through Flint. And I just started crying. And I said, okay. And I saw immediately how wrong I was, how close I was to hitting the rock. What happens when you're dealing with criticism and you're tired, right? And so I didn't hit the rock, but I knew that I didn't know what to say. So I said, God, obviously my judgment isn't the best right now. So I will say whatever you tell me to say at that meeting next Friday. And so between that day and December 2nd, then my CFO came to me. And me and my CFO work really well together. Been at Covenant. She's been there longer than me. And she said, I need a sabbatical. And I thought, I need a sabbatical. You can't. And I knew she needed a sabbatical. And so now, not only are we restructuring, I'm going to be without my CFO for a few months. And no CEO wants that. You think you want that, but you don't want that. And so now it has gone from bad to worse. And it's December 1st. My CFO needs to take some time off. I still don't know what I'm going to say in this meeting. And I was driving, and I said, Lord, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. And he still didn't say anything until I got home that night. Finally, he told me what to say at the meeting the next morning. He said, you need to tell them fully your rationale behind the decision one more time. But this time, lay it all out, all the contract, everything. Lay everything out one last time. He said, and then tell them that you were going to hit the rock. And I said, wait a minute. Isn't that HIPAA protected? That's private. Why do I need to tell them that, Lord? I'll do the first, but the second. He said, no. Tell them you were going to hit the rock. So this is an actual slide from December 2nd, 2022. I was driving to work that morning. I said I did not feel happy about driving to work and telling everybody I was going to be petty that day, but God stopped me. And I'm headed to work, and I just said, Lord, this is as bad as it gets as a leader. I will tell you how that turned out at the end of the session, because it's almost dinner. I got to hold you in some way. So I'll get to that back, but that time of God, that time really did kick off a sustained time of study with Moses for me. Let me first say, my mother is a retired third grade teacher. My father worked for the United Auto Workers, but he was a Sunday school superintendent at our church growing up. So I love a good Bible cartoon. You will see many, and I use them often at work. And this one is a good background for Numbers 11. So here we go. I'm actually going to go 4 through 17, because this is going to be the basis of what we're talking about. So the rabble with them began to crave other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves, and it tasted like something made with olive oil. When the dew settled on the camp at night, the manna also came down. Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance to their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised on oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, give us meat to eat. I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. Moses was really angry that day. Now, I love that tantrum. I have to be honest. I love that Moses even does tantrums. It lets us know we can do tantrums with the Lord. But in that particular one, Moses essentially tells the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to come get his kids or kill him. And I like that. I said, okay, Moses. Now, it is tempting as the leader to stay there because it just sounds kind of fun for the leader to, but no, we're going to spend most of our time with verse 17. I'll go 16 and then 17. So God lets Moses get it all out. And here's how God responds. The Lord said to Moses, bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting that they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. They will share the burden of the people with you so that you will not have to carry it alone. In other words, delegation is God's solution to overwhelm for leaders. When we're overwhelmed, God himself tells us to delegate. And I think, it's God's solution, but it's also a leader's challenge. If you look at what God is telling Moses to do in verse 17, I actually think it gives us indicators as to why so many times we don't actually delegate. Raise your hand if this is the first time you are hearing to delegate. Yeah, I didn't think so. All of us hear this all the time. There's a reason it's hard to do it. And I think verse 17 gives us some headlights. So first, Moses has to work with the kids. Now, Moses just told God, come get these kids or kill me. And God responds, no, work with them. And then Moses has to lose power. And if he does those two things, then he won't carry the burden alone. And if we're honest, those are not two easy things to do. So let's do a little myth busting though before I get into more. Working with the kids. Why is that so hard? Some of you might be thinking, that sounds good, but I do not have 70 people in my organization that I trust to share things with them. For that, I want us to think a little bit. Now, God told Moses to get 70 people. There are about 600,000 Israelite men, not counting the women and the children. And the women would not have been eligible for leadership. And because I don't swing at every pitch, I'm going to just let that go, okay? But so 70 out of 600,000 is 0.01%. If there's nobody in your organization that you can trust for 0.01% of the time. There are some really good hiring workshops that you might want to check out and just help that out. Most of us have that. Okay, so don't get caught on the 70. Look at your 0.01%. And then another thing is, I'm the only one I can trust. That's a real thing that we struggle with. And we may not say it like that, but it comes out in our actions when we don't share with other people. For this one, I want you to find your humility. And what do I mean by that? Can you imagine if when God told Moses, go get 70 people, if Moses says, I don't know about them, God, you know, you see how they've been acting. Moses had literally killed somebody before he was called into leadership. So while you may not be a murderer today, there is something that God could have disqualified you from leadership. So when you get nervous, like I'm the only one that can do, God looks over something with all of us, and you can do the same with the people you work with. Losing power. That's another one that gets tough, and this is a quick one to myth bust. You're always number 2. When you're delegating anything that God has given to you, it's because God gave it to you. So you're always number 2 in line with delegation, with kingdom work. We can share our power with others because God shares his with us, and that's just a simple thing. All right, so practical application. That all sounds good, that works, but how does this actually work? So let's go back into my temper tantrum days from 2022. All right, let's go to 2023. So this is January of 2023, all right? I'm not going to tell you about the meeting. I'll tell you that at the end. But we're in January, and we're looking at our meetings at Covenant. So we went through these 3 steps, and these are actual slides again. Meeting inventory. Then we were going to review the meeting inventory. And I said step 3 was going to be, we'll know it after the inventory. I don't know if that's what the inventory says. Tell me, why were we doing that? So this, I don't know what's going on. There's a couple Covenant folks out here. I don't know what's going on. Who made that decision, and why didn't they ask us? Said every Covenant Community Care employee ever. I mean, ever. You could say, guys, we've changed the cleaning company. Well, who decided to do that? So this was the issue, and I couldn't understand why nobody knew what was going on when I was in meetings from the moment I hit the door to the moment I left. So I felt like either we're going to eliminate all the meetings, but we're not going to be in meetings and uninformed. We had to figure something out. So we started looking at our meetings, and here's another Moses. I use this with them too. We couldn't be 10 Commandments Moses with this. When you think about how the 10 Commandments happen, Moses goes, talks to God. That's a one-on-one conversation, and he comes down with stone tablets. Erasers don't work on stone tablets. This couldn't be that. We needed to have an inclusive and decisive process in building this infrastructure at Covenant. So this was the meeting inventory. It's not that deep. This is an actual screenshot from it. How I came up with it, I went to our assistant. I said, I need a list of every meeting at Covenant, every committee, every single meeting, whether it happens or it doesn't. There was a 4-page list of meetings and committees and all at Covenant. I put on there what was the current setup, who was attending, what was the frequency, and then I assigned the meeting to different members of our leadership team. And all I asked them to do was answer 5 questions about their meetings. What is the purpose of your meeting? How is it going now? Is anyone missing from your meeting? What would you like to see your meeting become? What resources do you need to accomplish your desired state? And so they got a couple weeks to give it some thought, send it back to me. Here's what we learned. Meetings happened often, but not really. People didn't really show up. When you have 4 pages worth of committees, if you miss one, it's not that deep. So folks kind of came in and out. Our meetings have built on top of each other over time. So we had a committee that came as a result of changing the EMR. We just kept the committee and we lumped it in with everything else. And so we had all these different meeting types, which meant the same people were talking about the same thing over and over and over again, which adds to confusion. Our meetings lack direction and purpose. So many times I told them, I don't know is an okay answer. And so many people said, I don't know why we are having this meeting. It's just on my calendar and I come. I said, okay, that's fair. And then the problem is it was the main tool of communication at Covenant. So one thing that people kind of learn quickly to not say around me is, all right, let's end this meeting so we can get to the real work. Raise your hand if you're a provider here. Oh my goodness, look at all you, oh my goodness, look at you guys. Okay, if you didn't raise your hand, meetings are your real work. I had to accept that for myself. I'm the CEO. My whole job is to come in and talk to people. So if it's my real work, then I need to at least make it make sense, okay? So Patrick Lencioni puts it this way in his book, Death by Meeting. When we fail to get clarity and alignment during meetings, we set in motion a colossal wave of human activity as executives and their direct reports scramble to figure out what everyone else is doing and why. So when whatever chaos we don't address in the room just goes everywhere else in the organization. So we went from this 4 pages of meetings to this, a decision-making structure, because meetings were power at Covenant. And I'm using that word power intentionally because a lot of times in Christian organizations, we don't even like to admit that power exists in our organizations. A couple of my staff, they were asking me, what are you working on? What are you going to teach at CCHF? I said, I'm going to talk about delegation. First, they laughed, and I was deeply offended by that. So not that I have attained, but they did say I've gotten better. I've gotten much better. But then they said, well, I'm talking about power and sharing power. And they said, well, there's no power at Covenant. I said, yes, there is. There absolutely is. And we can't share what we won't even acknowledge. So we went to this, and a lot of times what I do now is play traffic cop. So if I get something that's impacting the clinic and it didn't go through the clinical governance committee where all my clinical leaders are, I got to send it back. I can't okay it. Did it go through CGC? So we did all these committees. They're great. They're running pretty well. But you see that one on the bottom, the personnel committee? That was the one. That's our TENA meeting at Covenant, okay? These are all the things that come to our personnel committee. Request to post. If a clinic wants to post for a new position. Request to hire. You interviewed and you're going to extend an offer. Status changes, hour reductions, salary changes, the annual benefits package, the annual performance reviews, annual raises, terminations, the staffing issues that nobody knows about but HR. All of that was at the personnel committee. And this committee has been in existence the whole time I've been at Covenant. I didn't even get to join the committee myself until I became acting CEO. And I was like, oh man, what's PCM? I wondered this whole time. Our staff, though, felt like this about personnel committee. It was really 10 commandments. So, I mean, what would happen is a nurse clinic manager could want to hire somebody, have interviewed that person. It goes to personnel committee, and personnel committee could say, I don't know if that's the right candidate, and send it back. And you never talked to the nurse clinic manager. So we're all talking as chiefs. We said, what do we do about personnel committee? And my chief medical officer said, well, why don't we just make the chiefs the personnel committee? All the chiefs, not just the CEO and the CFO, all of the chiefs. And it was quiet in the room because my CMO he's like a chill person. Anytime your doctor is saying he wants to meet weekly about administrative issues, you got to listen to that. And I said, well, Scott, that's a pretty good idea. And everybody around the room said, yeah, that's what we want. So we got rid of the monthly 4-hour Friday afternoon nap-inducing meeting. And now every week our chiefs meet as the personnel committee, and they now weigh in on all of this stuff. So we said, okay, that was in August. This slide is from August of 2023. We said, okay, I need to change because we need to adjust our calendars because it's a weekly meeting, and you don't do all those types of subjects in an hour. So that meeting usually goes 2 hours or so, and it can go even longer. So we said, okay, we'll make this change in November of 2023. So, all right. So when we had our first new PCM meeting, I did an orientation for the new members. So these are all slides from that orientation. I said, these are my expectations. Confidentiality. I told them this is our HIPAA. You're talking about employee issues, personnel issues. This is power, but you got to handle it well. Attendance, okay? If we're gonna run these through all of us, we all need to show up. And then engagement. And I want to give a little tip here. This is a 2025 tip on 2023 slide. Equip your 70. It's not fair to delegate something to somebody and not give them the resources they need to do well with it. So this whole year in 2023, all of my chiefs got executive coaching. It was actually their performance review for the year because they all do their jobs. I said, so to get a good review this year, you just need to complete executive coaching, and we're going to do 2 chiefs retreats. We are going to figure out how to be a team together. And then I did an optional 360. Raise your hand if you know what a 360 review is. Okay. I get one myself. I request a 360 myself once every 3 years. It's like my own individual strategic plan. What it is as CEO, normally only the board of directors does my performance review. But once every 3 years, Covenant gets to review me. All of my direct reports, mid-managers. People don't know, but I guess they'll know after this. Our janitorial staff reviews me every time we do this, because they get a different perspective of me, and they're able to give all that feedback, and I take it and I say, okay, this is what I need to work on. I always make it optional. If you force somebody to get feedback that they're not ready for, that's just not a good idea. So I said, listen, the first 2 you guys have to do, but this third one, it's optional. They all opted in. So in 2023, they were all getting professional development, leadership development resources to equip them to be able to handle the power that they were getting. Engagement. So this is a real slide again. Listen, read the quote. Dissent is not disloyalty, negativism, or anti-team player. You can dissent and still be valued in this space. And that was from our Michigan Primary Care Association. It was a training I had gone to. To be in PCM, we have to have authentic, honest, and informed debate about decisions. When you're talking about people's salaries, when you're trying to make sure stuff is equitable, we have to be honest. I have to be able to have this in an unfiltered way. But unfiltered does not mean unprofessional. Okay, you always heard the person is like, well, I'm just keeping it real. That's just how real rude. Like, you don't have to be rude to be unfiltered. You just need to be able to be honest and talk with each other. So what I was doing was laying the groundwork for them to disagree with me. Okay, you can't assume that when you put people in a room, especially when you have the title CEO, that everybody's going to feel comfortable saying, I think you got that one wrong. And so I was laying groundwork for them to be able to dissent. And then I said, we're also going to bring in a modified Robert's Rules of Order. Now, I grew up in a Black Baptist church. You have not been to a more professional meeting than a business meeting at a Baptist church. Okay, it's just how we do. Robert's Rules of Orders are a thing. So my dad is also a deacon. I said, Dad, and a parliamentarian at that. I said, Dad, teach me a little bit of Robert's Rules of Order. And the reason I did that is where you bring in motions. Every chief has a vote. Okay, so on everything we do, there's a vote. We raise a motion, your vote. And if you oppose, your opposition is documented. And then, okay. Now, I taught them how to do this because I was giving people a process to disagree with me. So I gave you groundwork to disagree with me. Here's now your method to disagree with me. I taught them too well because I lost a vote. And boy, when I lost a vote, I wanted to change something with the hiring process. I think it might have been me and one other person. Everybody else voted it down, and I knew I didn't have the votes. And so for a minute, I thought I could say, let's run a demonstration project and then come back. And I said, no, Joslyn, you've lost the vote. You got to take the vote. So I said, all right, we've discussed enough. Let's take the vote. I raised my hand, all in favor, me and one other person, all opposed, everybody else. I said, okay, you guys have it. Lost that one. Kept moving. Now, I have worked with these people for over 10 years, not in CEO capacity now, 5-6 years. All of them were stealing little glances at me out the side of their eye to see, was it okay that we just voted her down? And so after that meeting, I actually talked to every one of them individually and said, what just happened in there is what we've been working toward all year. I'm not looking for rubber stamp decisions. I'm not looking for you to just go along to get along, because that second sentence, that's how you get the best ideas in the room. Few things are as frustrating as rolling something out and somebody saying it not working, and after the fact somebody saying, yeah, I knew that wasn't going to work. Say it here. And sometimes we get frustrated with that, but as a leader you have to ask yourself, have I created the environment where they feel comfortable saying that's not going to work? So this is November. I closed that orientation out by giving them this review. I said, look where we were in December of 2022. I was about to hit the rock. And now look where we were in August. You all were saying we never let you do anything. And now look where we are in November. Now this one says, Moses, we've been lost in the desert for 40 years. Now will you stop and ask for directions? And that's how sometimes, honestly, our clinical staff feels about admin sometimes. Like, we're trying to tell y'all, now will you stop and ask for directions? And so I then said, make sure you stop for a second and realize just how amazingly cool this is, Moses. And I told our crew, I said, man, look, November of last year to November of this year, look how far we've come. This is pretty cool. And it has been. What's been the result of all of this? Well, they will share the burden of the people with you so that you will not have to carry it alone. God to Moses and to Joslyn. I don't carry it by myself anymore. So this picture right here, that's an actual PCM meeting. And what they were doing in that meeting was approving the raises for those at the annual salary increases. And that is my chief medical officer and my chief dental officer standing up at the screen. They were all into it. I'm in the back. I'm just watching them be into it. I said, this is pretty cool. Look at them. And they were going for it. And then the picture right here is, again, my chiefs at an all-agency meeting. They were up presenting. I was sitting down. It was really nice. Both of these, I have to say, increased my quality of life. Like, yes, it's been good for Covenant. I think we have better decisions, faster decisions. We roll things out much better because everybody's brought in, because everybody has a voice and a vote. They don't just get to weigh in, they have power. We have shared the power. It's made me a better friend and a better mom because I'm not consumed with this burden that I wasn't supposed to carry on my own anyway. But on the morning of December 2nd, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know any of that was going to happen. All I knew was that I was headed to work, and I was about to tell everybody that I was going to pettily hit the rock on them, and I really wasn't feeling too great about having to confess that. One of the things that had really been stressing me out was a part of that, for that restructuring plan to work, we needed the new building to open in November of 2023 for patient care, and we hadn't broken ground. When I announced in July, we had one permit. It was one permit holding it up. I said, okay, we'll be in the ground. They were like, oh yeah, we'll be in the ground by July at the late, like end of the month. We're almost done. That one permit held us up through August, September, October, November, December. And now it's December in Detroit. We are not in the ground. I am closing 2 locations to consolidate into a bigger location, and we haven't even started construction on the bigger location, and it's December in Detroit. So I had just gone to the medical director of the new site and said, hey, I'm not ready to say anything to staff yet, but it might be spring. And I was feeling like, God, on top of everything else, you have me out here. You said it was going to work, and now we're not even in the ground on this building. So I'm headed to work, and I used to do this thing. I would pull up to that construction site, and there's an abandoned building right across from it. I would drive through the alley, turn around and just face the land. And for a long time, I would pray, God, please move, please do it. And by the time it got into the fall, I was praying, God, just tell me you don't want to do it, and I'll tell everybody else, and we can just leave this all alone. So the morning of December 2nd, I was headed to work, and I said, okay, I might as well pull over again because, well, why not? And so I pulled off the exit, and this is what I saw. There were 3 trucks sitting on the site. And that is a screenshot from my phone. If you have an iPhone, you're a cool person. If you don't have an iPhone, the green bubbles, then we'll have a conversation about that after this session. But but if you have an iPhone, it timestamps it. December 2nd, 2022, 7:55 in the morning. I called our project manager. And I said, Jackie, it's trucks out here. She said, yeah, I didn't want to get your hopes up just in case it didn't work out, but we're in the ground. I said, wait a minute. I called my parents. I woke everybody up. I said, guys, we're in the ground. And then I sat there and I said, I cannot believe what God has done. It would have been good enough if he would have just stopped me from hitting the rock. That's kind enough. He didn't have to do that. But to get us in the ground the morning of, I said, well, there you have it. And I thought, oh, that's why I got to tell everybody I hit the rock. Because you talk about for a conference for his glory, every time I go to that building, I know who built that building. I know who built that building. I know who did it. That's December 2nd in Detroit. So then people start saying, well, it's never going to be done on time. We opened on November 1st. It was done. It was done, and it's gorgeous on the side of the road. So every time I pull up to that building, I'm reminded of God's faithfulness and his graciousness towards me. Yes, towards covenant, but also towards me. And I hope to share that part with you guys, because it can be hard in leadership when you mess up, even if you didn't actually do it. I felt terrible that I was going to hit the rock on my folks. I like my people. But God is gracious and kind, and he gives mercy. And yes, he convicted me, but there is therefore now no condemnation. I wasn't condemned. And if you're in, that space in your own leadership journey, just please take that. No, there's a building on the west side of Detroit that God built just to show that he gives us mercy and he gives us grace. So I'm going to get you some time for questions really quick, but a couple more. Key takeaways: find, share, equip. Find the power in your organization. The power is wherever decisions are made. Okay, so wherever decisions are made in your organization, find that. Then share that power. I like to think of meetings as the room where it happens. Give it a good old Hamilton reference. Define your room, and then define your it. Who needs to be in the room to decide the it, okay? And then equip those who have power. This is an important point, and one that often gets skipped. When you're bringing people in, make sure they have the resources to actually do the job and do it well, and create that kind of environment. All right, a few resources. So I am an avid studier. I'm an avid reader. I listen to podcasts. Whatever you're doing, equip yourself as a leader. You can do that however. So this book everybody should have. Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership, Seeking God in the Crucible of Ministry by Ruth Haley Barton. I have read and reread this book. It is all about the crucible of ministry through the story of Moses. So she really delves into Moses. If you don't have time to read the book, if you're like, I don't know, season 4 of her podcast walks through the book. So it's not as in-depth as the book, but it just gives you an idea. And she takes us things like 9 or 10 episodes all on Moses. For meetings, I studied meetings a lot when I was working on our meetings. So Priya Parker has a great book, The Art of Gathering. That is one of the best books on how to design a meeting in the world. I love that book. There's also a podcast episode for her. If you don't have time, go to Brene Brown's Dare to Lead podcast. There's an interview with her and Priya Parker where she actually takes one of Brene Brown's staff meetings and gives it a meeting makeover. So that can give you some of the things. And we used a lot of this at Covenant. The Chiefs just didn't know it. And then Patrick Lencioni has a book called Death by Meeting, which is dramatic but wonderful. It is a great book. And if you've ever read any of his books, they're pretty easy reads and entertaining ones. And then just to close with leadership testimonials. So one of the things I love about CCHF the most is it's a safe space for us to come and talk about when we got it wrong, and we can all learn from each other. There were a couple sessions last year that were just great testimonials about troubling and tough times in the life of a leader. If you're feeling that and you just want to hear some more, so Rick Donlin, our new CEO, and Susan Post, they had one last year called The Long Defeat. That was amazing. I know I've listened to it many times. And then James Brooks had one called The Weary Leader that you should definitely check out. See you guys. All right. Appreciate it.